So, Brad, it's been a couple weeks now. A couple weeks ago, I was so proud of my friend because he treated himself to a $120 bottle of scotch. And my friend, who is, I don't want to say he's a cheapy McGee, but just to quote the French, he's a cheapy McGee. So, but now, it's been a couple weeks.
Yeah.
You $120 bottle of scotch that you treated yourself to as an adult man. You said, you know what, I'm going to treat myself to a $120 bottle of scotch.
I deserve this. Yeah.
I want to know, how does it taste? How does a $120 scotch taste at home?
I have no idea. So here's the problem. I went up to this wonderful distillery up in the Finger Lakes, up in upstate New York.
Yes.
And they had a tasting. And I had a taste of the scotch. It was unbelievably great. And I said, I think I want to buy this bottle. He says, that's one here. 8 points, $120, right? So I'm like, okay, I deserve it. And after that day, after that tasting where I had like a shot, I've got it at home. I've got it in our liquor cabinet, right? And my wife says, it's Saturday night. Why don't you pour yourself a nice glass of scotch? And I go, this isn't really a special enough occasion for that.
Wild turkey for me. That's the one for me.
And she was very kind. I still got a bottle of Lafroig in there that I got for Christmas. So it's like it's not like I'm going all the way to wild turkey. Lafroig's still a very good scotch. I love Lafroig.
Lafroig's nice, yeah.
I have not been able to open up that bottle of scotch because I feel like it's got to be a really special event. And so far, I haven't had any events that were $120 bottle of scotch. Good.
Okay, are you ever going to have a $120 bottle of scotch event?
Eventually, I'm just gonna. You know what it is. It's like once you break the seal, it'll be done. I just have to open it up for that first time and get over it and pour myself a nice.
You gotta break the seal. Literally
tumbler.
break the seal. Yeah. Okay, so let me ask you, as a you know me. I don't really drink all that much, but as a non-drinker.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, whiskey in my past has gotten me drunk. It does that job really well.
Yeah.
What is the difference between a $10 jug of Costco whiskey and a $120 bottle of whiskey? What's the difference?
It's the smoothness. In other words, you know how when you take a shot of like wild turkey,
how it kicks you back a little bit.
Yeah. And it has that recoil in your mouth. You go like that.
Yeah.
A good scotch is very smooth. It has, and also it's a good scotch like Lafroig, and this one was very much the same, a very peaty scotch.
Right.
It ends up kind of permeating through your nose and stuff. So it's like it's an entire feel of warmth that radiates through your body.
It's a taste sensation, is what you're saying.
Yes. And
okay.
it's very much an experience, other than just taking something that's very alcoholic into your mouth and it makes your throat recoil. A good scotch is very smooth.
So, okay, let me translate that into Dave Kelletism from what you just said. A good scotch is very smooth. So to me, no argument, scotch will get you drunk. But to me, scotch is like licking motor oil off of a Scotsman's armpit. You know what I mean? It's like, so now you're saying yes, but $120 scotch is the Scotsman has showered. So now it's got a little bit more of a pleasing sensation. It's like gradations of gross. You know what I mean? Like that to me as a non-scotch drinker, that's what it sounds like.
But before, can we just put you into your proper categorization? The last time I was with you, you were pawning off on me peanut butter flavored whiskeys. Would you please state?
Because it didn't taste like a Scotsman's armpit. That was the goal for me. It was like,
state for the jury whether this is true or not. Peanut butter flavored whiskey.
Yes, because I was like desperate for any type of whiskey that didn't smell or taste like a Scotsman's pits and bits. I was like, I just want peanut butter is better. It's a step up, and And on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about pits and bits and making comics.
And making a living from comics. That's the closest to a Scots accent I can do, and it sounds like a pirate.
It did sound like a pirate.
Oh, my goodness. I'm
We're
Brad
traditionally
Geiger.
more from Wales, by the way.
The editor of the Webcomics Handbook on Substack and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his pal Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. And speaking of pirates, I've always been impressed by the one historical fact that, like, Spain has this huge armada, and they're sending it to England. Massive armada, the biggest armada in the world. No one could beat Spain.
Yeah.
And Queen Elizabeth's like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to send a bunch of Welshmen on small boats. They'll be the pirates, and and they took down the Spanish armada. I love that. I love that a bunch of Welshmen on boats are like, right, we're going in. Anyway, so today on the podcast, we got a couple of fun topics. It's going to be a big show, and one specifically fun update from me later on in the show.
Yes.
But I want to start with this one, Brad, because I think you have taught many a class on writing, and it is both your specialty and your speciality. This question comes in from Jay Lark over at patreon.com/comiclab, and it says, hey, comics uncles, how would you go about writing a story that does not have a happy ending, yet is still a satisfying story? How does one write a tragedy that people actually want to read? Brad, I open this question to you. It's a question as old as the Greeks. How do you write a tragedy that is satisfying and leaves the audience going, yeah, that was a great story. I love it.
This is such a great topic. And because the opening swing on this is that you don't write necessarily a tragedy a whole lot differently than you write another type of story, in that all of the storytelling principles, all of those building blocks of good narrative are the same. You're going to apply them differently, of course, but all of those things that we talk about on this show every day, when we talk about tension and release, and we talk about characterizations and motivations and stuff like that, all of those things are the same. You're just taking them in a different direction. So the good news is everything that you've learned about good storytelling is going to be applied here.
Yes. That's a really good way to look at it. Yes. Okay. Expand on that. So so I'm sitting down to write my tragedy. I know it's going to end in a tragedy. There's a death. There's a fall of a kingdom. The adventure doesn't work out. The main characters fall apart as a relationship. You get where I'm going with this.
Yes.
Any one of these can work as a tragedy. What am I doing differently from the outset as I sit down to craft this outline or sit down to craft these characters and their arcs that I wouldn't do in comedy? Or is it literally the same thing?
It's very much the same thing. Here's where I'm going to go with this. The first thing you've got to do when you're sitting down to write any kind of a story is to consider your characters' wants and needs. All right.
Okay.
And this is a conversation that I get into in my storytelling class quite a bit, in that your protagonist has a want and a need, or maybe even multiple wants and needs. And it's not a bad idea, by the way, of your other characters to have their wants and needs as well. And all of these do, what all these do is help you to understand their motivations and help them to act believably in your narrative. But let's talk about wants and needs. Number one, what's your character's want? That's very simple. Your character's want is right there on the surface level of your story, right? Ariel the mermaid wants to go up and walk around with the people. Belle wants to stop living this provincial life. Tony Soprano wants to elevate his family so his kids don't have to grow up in the mafia life, and that they can at some point have a better life than he had, right? All of our characters have wants. Needs are a little bit harder to define, because what a need is what the universe wants for your character.
Right. That they themselves might not even know.
They might not even want it.
Ever. Yeah, they might not even want it. Yeah.
So Ariel needs to grow up and get a more mature idea of what love is. Tony Soprano needs to heal his generational trauma in his relationship with his mother so that he can have better relationships with the women in his life. A want is what your character wants. A need is what the universe wants for your character.
Can I pause you for 1 second? Because I think the whole audience is asking this question with me. Have you ever seen the Little Mermaid movie?
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, what was the name again of the main character that every child knows by heart?
Ariel, the Little Mermaid.
Is it not Ariel? I thought it was Ariel. Where does this Ariel stuff come from?
I think I'm pronouncing it the way the crab did.
Oh, delicious. Okay, I'm sorry to stop you. Keep going.
So, and by the way, for this next part, I'm going to lean a little bit on a great site I found for this. You can check them out on YouTube called Studio Binder. But they had a really wonderful way of lining this up that I really like a lot. So I use it quite a bit when I'm thinking about this stuff. If your character gets what they want and they get what they need, that's a happy ending. That's a sweet
comedy
ending.
Yeah, in a sense, yeah.
If the character gets what they need, but not what they want, that's kind of a semi-sweet ending is what Studio Binder calls it.
Yeah.
If they get what they want, but not what they need, that's a bittersweet ending. And if they don't get what they want and they don't get what they need, that is a bitter ending or an unhappy ending.
Right.
So there's kind of your first step in writing an unhappy ending is that you're going to be identifying your character's wants and needs. And maybe they're not going to get either one of those things, or maybe they're going to get one or the other, and it's going to leave you with something less than a completely Hollywood happy ending.
Yeah. To reinforce Brad's central point that all the same building blocks, all the same tools, all the same steps are the same for comedy and for tragedy.
Yeah.
I want to tell you two quotes from completely different types of creators. One from Carol Burnett.
Yeah.
Famous for her comedy, probably one of the most brilliant American comedians who has ever lived. Carol Burnett is brilliant. And then the other one, I think is from Twain, but it might be from Oscar Wilde, but you'll get the point with both of them. So Carol Burnett said that comedy is tragedy plus time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So all the building blocks that are in tragedy, you add a little bit of time to that, and then it becomes comedy, right?
Yeah.
Because Brad slips on a banana, ow, that's a tragedy. Right. Brad slips on a banana, and then there's a comic beat. Now it's comedy, right? Because now you see Brad's all right. He's just embarrassed himself, and he's a jackass, and right, you know.
Well, so, anybody can slip on a banana.
Yeah, no, it doesn't have to be Brad. Exactly. It could have been Ariel, that famous character from Little Mermaid. So you get the point there is that the same building blocks for Carol Burnett, but then the opposite is true. Twain wrote that every comedy, if you give it more time, eventually becomes a tragedy because eventually that person, that character gets old. The person that they fell in love with and married dies or gets cancer or their kids get in a horse carriage accident. You get where I'm going with that. Right. I think that was Twain. It might have been Wilde. But anyway, you get the point is that both people coming from completely different sides of the coin in terms of comedy and tragedy say that the other one is possible just with a little more time. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it proves Brad's point that all the same building blocks of storytelling, all the same building blocks of character development and arc and satisfying moments as the story progresses, they are the same for comedy and for tragedy.
So let's talk about a few strategies and how we're going to use them to write our tragedy or to write our unhappy ending. Okay.
Yep.
And the first one is something you've heard Dave and I talk about on the show 110 times. And we're going to talk about how it applies specifically to this case. And that is to set an emotional hook, right? To build a deep emotional involvement with your protagonist to the reader. And I encourage you to do this as quickly as possible with today's audiences that have kind of a short attention span. They're scrolling through things very quickly. you don't have a lot of time to do this. You need to set that emotional hook very, very quickly and make your audience care about your character. Now, let's talk about that. Two great examples of tragedies, and these both, I'm going to argue, very much were unhappy endings. And that was Breaking Bad, the TV series, and its correspondent, Better Call Saul. We know it ends badly for the main character in both of those stories. We're going to have an unhappy ending, right? They're not going to get what they want and what they need. They're going to get some combination other than that, but they're not going to get both. Right. And we're going to be left with somewhat of an unhappy ending. We stuck with Walter White for season after season after season, watching him get steadily more corrupt, more of a bad guy than a
villain,
good guy,
yeah.
right? And we stuck with it because we had such an emotional connection to this guy that was a family man trying to set his family up because he knew he was going to die, right? Better Call Saul, it's the same thing. We are so entrenched. We're so emotionally involved in Saul's character that even though, and this was really brilliant, we know from season 1, episode 1, that it ends horribly for this character, right? It's not going to end well, but we want to see it through so badly. A big part of it is because we've got an emotional connection with that character.
Yeah, and it's the emotional connection that is central to both comedy and tragedy, because you need to care. You need to be invested in, regardless of the outcome of their life, what happens to this person. And so setting that emotional hook is key in any creative endeavor that you're going to have characters walk through.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, here's another strategy that we can apply, and that's foreshadowing the doom. In other words, if you have a sense of inevitability to your narrative, and by the way, this kind of dovetails with what we were just talking about with Saul. If you can see the tragedy coming, like a slow motion car crash, your audience is going to be unable to look away. They're gonna be in it to see how this thing plays out. A great example of foreshadowing doom is in The Dark Knight from 2008. From the start, Harvey Dent is framed as Gotham's White Knight, but there's constant hints that he's going to fall. In fact, at one point, his line is either you die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Right. It's foreshadowing his transformation into Two-Face. And we know it's going to happen. We know that this is going to be there, and they keep dropping these hints, and we can't look away. We're so invested that we've got to see it to the closing credits.
Yeah. And that's true whether it's a good version or a bad version of Two-Face. There's been some weird ones. So
you mean the Tommy Lee Jones?
The Tommy Lee Jones one was a weird one. But it's true. And so I love that idea. It's so much of this in terms of you either die a hero or you live to see yourself become a villain. Yeah. Again, it keeps coming back to storytelling is about where you choose to end the story.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
Hamlet, had you chosen to end Hamlet's story before his father died, granted that was a few years before the play started.
Yeah.
What a happy story for Hamlet. He's living a happy life. He's got a young lady in his life. His dad's doing a great job running the kingdom. His mom seems to be happy. Everything's great. Yep. Add a little bit of time to that story, right? And so the same thing is true with that Batman line. It is that time, really, I keep coming back to this, I know, but it's really where do you choose to end? Yeah. And that's why I know that is like a broken record, but it's the choosing of the ending that makes something a comedy or a tragedy. It has nothing to do with construction, I feel like. But keep going. I agree with you about foreshadowing, but I'm saying it's where the line is drawn that the key difference comes down. Yes.
No, I agree 100%. I agree 100%. Here's another thing to keep in mind, writing a story with an unhappy ending. Maybe what you're offering your audience is a cathartic emotional experience.
Yes.
Audiences want to feel something. And it's not necessarily happiness that they want to feel. In fact, think back, Dave, to all the movies that you've seen when you're walking out of the theater and you say, You know what? I kind of wish they didn't have a happy ending. In other words, you were disappointed by this contrived Hollywood happy ending.
So like an example of where it is ostensibly, no questions asked, a tragedy. Everybody is dead and it didn't work out. The movie 300, right?
Yes.
Where the Greeks of, what is it? How do you pronounce that? Thermopylae? I always pronounce that wrong, right?
You're looking for the wrong guy for pronunciation help
today.
Famous
historical battle. 300 Greeks in this little mountain pass holding back an entire army, and it's hyperbolized in the movie to being huge legions of army, but they're all dead by the end. But so why do we find it satisfying? Because there was heroism in the courage of their death, not in the fact that they survived and went on to raise children and lived a happy life. The spark in and amongst the tragedy was that they protected their homeland and that they died a heroic death. So that's what I'm getting at in terms of echoing Brad's point, is that the emotional satisfaction comes not from the fact that it is a comedia. It is not a happy ending. The emotional satisfaction comes from, these humans died well. That's what it is.
Yes. Well, and think of all the movies that you've seen like that, that sometimes are the best movies that are exactly what you just described. I would put Glengarry Glen Ross in that category.
Which I still haven't seen.
Even though I know you haven't seen that one. I
gotta get a delicious glass of Scotsman Armpit with Brad and watch Glengarry Glen Ross. He keeps telling me, yes.
But even others like Thelma and Louise. Right?
Oh, yeah, that's another
Very
one.
much. Now,
died well in among their terrible circumstances,
and they didn't get what they wanted, certainly, but there's, in a certain cosmic way, they got what they needed, which was to have agency over their own selves. But not a happy ending. Steel Magnolias, another great
Certainly not a happy ending for the car, which had no choice in the matter.
No, not at all. Not at all. It was a very nice car. Steel Magnolias, some of the best acting performances of that era. Not a happy ending, but you feel so much. You go through so many emotions. That's another one that I can, even though I know I'm going to get all mopey and everything, if I'm walking through or clicking through and Steel Magnolias is on, I've got to watch that movie because it makes you feel so much. So sometimes just what you're offering your audience is a chance at emotion.
Is that really a movie that will stop you no matter what as you're clicking around?
Oh, I can't not watch that movie. But between the acting performance, I'm going to argue that Steel Magnolias and Glengarry Glen Ross are ace movies, top 5 movies for the same reason. It's got an incredibly compelling storyline, and the performances are each one of them is Oscar worthy.
So. You have picked arguably 2 of the better, if not best, movies of American cinema as things that will stop you as you're clicking around channels. Can I admit to you, in the worst possible way, the movie that always has me stop, and I'm embarrassed that it has me stop every time. Every time I will stop and watch it all the way through if I see it on TV. Starship Troopers, which is a terrible movie, but it has just enough of a sci-fi hook that I'm like, I'm into it. I like it. And it's so cheesy in a hokey version of what autocracy would be like and fascism in space, but it's I can't not watch it. It hooks me every time, Brad, and it's embarrassing to myself for myself that's the movie.
For me, it's Blues Brothers. That same thing. I can't not watch, and it's mainly because of the music.
Good comedy with 2 of the better comedians that have ever come out. Anyway, So what's the next one you got for us on this
Here's another
idea?
Strategy that I want to share with you. Subverting expectations, right? The audience expects a happy ending, but gets something completely unexpected, right? And that can be engaging. That can be, oh my gosh, I thought we were heading for someplace good, and you completely rug pulled me. Now, this can't be just a rug pull for the sake of a rug pull. It's got to mean something. It's got to have some kind of depth to it. But subverting expectations can be a great way of leaving your audience with a great experience.
And I'll tell you a really good example of that is the movie The Sixth Sense, M. Night Shyamalan's The Sixth Sense.
Yes.
And so here's why that is both a tragedy and a comedia in the traditional sense, not comedy in the ha-ha sense. But It is a satisfying ending for Bruce Willis's character, but it is unquestionably a tragedy. He is dead. He is a ghost, right? There is nothing satisfying about his outcome, and yet the arc of what his character was able to achieve and the somewhat peace that he was able to find is satisfying, emotionally satisfying to the audience.
Yep. Here's another great example. No Country for Old Men. You're expecting a showdown all the way throughout this movie. You're expecting a showdown, and you never get it. You never really get a showdown between the protagonist and the antagonist. Here's another strategy that I want to share with you. Make the journey worth it. Now, that's one that is somewhat similar to what I was just talking about. But if the journey is worth it, your audience is going to go along with you on any kind of a ride. Really great example is The Watchmen, right? Ozymandias gets away with mass murder to save humanity. Rorschach is killed for refusing to stay silent. But the philosophical debates, the moral dilemmas, all that great comic book stuff, all that meta level commentary on comic book is so wonderful that it makes that experience, that comic book, and I'll argue I enjoyed the movie, but it makes that whole thing very worthwhile.
Yeah,
you know?
That's a really good. Yeah, and the arcs along the way, in terms of making the journey worthwhile, there are so many moments in a story like Watchmen that are themselves edifying or instructional or entertaining. That you're like, oh, this journey was a great walk along the way to get here, even though the ending is frankly tragic for a lot of people in a lot of different ways, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Finally, here's the last one that I'm going to share with you, the last strategy, and that is to make the unhappy ending feel earned, right? It's an unhappy ending, but it's earned. I'll give you a great example from 2017, the movie Logan. Right, which is basically Wolverine as an old man.
Logan. Dying, yeah.
You know he's going to die. You know his whole arc has been all about kind of being this protector, and now and also being a very conflicted human being. Right now, he's got to protect this little girl, and you know it's going to be his last act. It's going to be the last thing this guy does is protect her, but. It's okay that he dies at the end because it's an earned death. It's a well-earned death. It gives his whole character kind of an end note.
A good swan song. Yes.
And so, yes, you know, it's going to be sad to see Wolverine die, but it's such a good death, and it's such a full circle to his character. A good conclusion that it's a satisfying experience.
And that single example, Logan, actually rolls in a lot of things that we've been talking about in this discussion, because remember the Twain's construction that tragedy is comedy plus time, right? So Logan's younger days, we read with glee because here he is slicing up a sentinel, and here he is fighting Apocalypse, and this is fun. Oh, he always wins. What a great right?
Yes.
So those are the commedia moments of Logan's life.
Yeah.
Now, plus time, we see this one of the other aspects that Brad talked about with foreshadowing. He's coughing the whole time. We see his healing factor breaking down, right? We know that it is coming. His life is about to end, as all human lives eventually do. But to Brad's point, it's satisfying because his swan song is representative of the fight that he fought his whole life, which was to try to protect others, to try to do something with his powers to make other people's lives worthwhile and saved. Yeah. And so his final act is, again, a life worth living because he went out doing what he was meant to do, which was to protect this little girl and let her go on and live her own life and her own path.
Yeah. So I agree with you 100%. To wrap up this topic, and by the way, I shared a few strategies. There are obviously scores of other ways that you can go about this that all have to do with good narrative. Mm-hmm. What I want you to do, who's our question asker on this, Jay? What I want Jay to do is to certainly consider those, but also watch some or pay attention to some of the other media that intrigues Jay, and say, and even if it's not a tragedy, and in fact, especially if it's not a tragedy, and to ask yourself, how can I apply those same principles? Maybe something I saw in a very happy ending. How can I apply those same principles, but twist them so that I can use them for a tragedy? Because you're going to find it's all those same building blocks. You're just building a different shaped structure than you were in a happy ending. You're just building a different shape.
Exactly. I'm thinking, I don't know why I thought of this, but like, think of any SNL sketch, Saturday Night Live sketch. All those building blocks for most of those sketches are tragedy building blocks. Something terrible is happening. Something's incredibly uncomfortable. Somebody's marriage is falling apart. And they use those same building blocks to twist it into a different shape for comedy. You'll just do the same thing for tragedy. So yes, absolutely. 100% co-sign with Brad on that.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on Comic Lab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics. So, Dave, I hear we've got an update, and I know one of the updates, and I can't wait to talk about it. But let's go into updates.
All right, let's go into updates. So this week, a mere yesterday, Brad, I publicly launched my new Kickstarter for Anatomy of Dogs. This is my 24th book, and I think my 18th Kickstarter.
Wow.
So getting better at it. And this book is going to be delightful. But I'm really happy because I did the secret Patreon launch that I often advise people to do on this show. And it worked great. Right out of the gate on day one, we were at 20,000, and the public launch is going great on day two. And now I have what Brad and I like to call the 26 days of hating each other, hating yourself, as you go, hey everybody, you're banging your drum. Hey, come check out my Kickstarter. I hate myself, but I am optimistic. I'm happy. The book is going to go great. And I really do hope that everybody jumps in over at dogkickstarter.com. I'm really, really, really proud of this book, and I think you're going to love it.
I'm so happy you got that redirect, that URL redirect for dogkickstarter.com. I think it's such a great, it's almost impossible to forget. Right? Well, if you're thinking about Dave's Anatomy of Dogs, dogkickstarter.com is going to be the first thing you think about.
That's right. Like, you're currently on the metro or driving, or you're away at a different part of your house. You're not at a place where you can but when you get to your computer, you're going to remember dogkickstarter.com. Yeah. No, but in all seriousness, and this is something that I recommend to people, it's one of those $7 investments in your Kickstarter that is worthwhile. You know, I immediately let it cancel as soon as the Kickstarter's done. I'm out $7 or $8 or whatever it was. But like, in the meantime, for the 30 days, dogkickstarter.com serves a nice purpose, you know?
Yeah. Oh, you're going to let that cancel, are you? You're not going to hold on to that for like in the future if you want to use it for a different book?
Are you the kind of person that holds on to every URL you ever buy?
You don't want to know. You don't want to know, Brad, how many freaking URLs I've got.
You're like the aunt that has the living room stuffed with old. Oh God, Brad, no. Let the URLs go, Brad.
You look at those and you go, well, you never know when I'm going to need something like that.
Oh my God,
I'm a domain hoarder.
So I just want to give everybody a little sneak peek into Brad Geiger's brain. I don't know if I'm going to need the URL Evil Link Volume 1 Kickstarter again. I might need that one again.
It was such a nice URL.
What if I decide to restart and do Volume 1 again? I'm going to need that one.
Well, as long as we're talking about URLs, let's talk about the other update that you've got. This goes back to a conversation that you and I had about tracking our Kickstarters and the fact that you can make special Kickstarter URLs that you can then track so you can see what's working and what's not. And you've always been very good at this.
Yes. Okay, so yes, and this is another Kickstarter strategy. Oh my God, I almost sounded like Ariel there for a minute. This is a Kickstarter strategy that Brad and I have recommended, which is they allow specific URLs that you can create and you can name them. So this is the URL that I will share when I share my Kickstarter on Blue Sky. This is the one that I will share when I put it on my blog. This is the one that I will share when I do it to my MailChimp or mailing list, right? Or Substack or this or that. And it's really effective to see what's working in real time. And then at the end of it, to sort of survey like, hey, and by the way, it was really instructive to Brad, but especially to me after my Drive Kickstarter to say, oh, Twitter no longer has any utility.
Right.
And it is a septic tank of humanity, so I'm getting off this platform.
Yeah.
Because after 30 days and ostensibly talking to 10,000 people on Twitter,
Right.
I got 2 people that
Right.
came from Twitter over those 30 days, 10,000 people to my Kickstarter for Drive. And so that tracking told me all I need to know to stop wasting time on Twitter. I got off Twitter. I also got off Instagram.
Yep.
I'm no longer on Facebook. It's a great way to tell you that those platforms are not performing for you anymore.
Yeah.
But it's also, again, like I said, in real time, a great way to see what's working. Did this campaign work? Did that campaign work?
Yeah.
You can make it really specific. So this time, as an update, I made Brad Geiger a specific code and said, hey, Brad, if you happen to share the show, now we will know how many expensive whiskeys I will owe you when we go to the Reuben Awards this year for the National Cartoon Society. And Brad, like a good friend, used the code yesterday. And guess what, gang? 24 hours later, there's already 2 people that have backed the Kickstarter just from Brad Geiger. It's already beating my old Twitter account.
Yes, I was going to say I'm already tied with Twitter. I'll surely beat it. I've already got 2 whiskey sours for Reuben night. And remember, folks, listen at home. The Reubens usually go for about 3 nights. So we have just scratched the surface here of what we're going to get to. And by the way, such a brilliant move on Dave's part, because he goes, hey, for every one that you bring in, I owe you a drink at the Reubens. So now if you think Dave is going to be promoting this thing, I'm going to be promoting it like crazy, because I want to see how big of a drink order I can rack up for the Reuben Awards. So now I'm a man on a mission. So what I need, I'll probably put it on this show notes.
That's not fair. You can't use. No, you can't use our shared comic book.
I will be. Yes, I'll be. You're right. I'll be screwing up the data. So what you need to do is you need to go over to my Blue Sky, where you will for sure see me talking about it, and click on that link so that you're doing 2 things at once. You're supporting a great book and you're helping to get me drunk in Boston.
Oh my God, Brad has so many Scotsman's armpits he needs to lick, and you need to help him get there, gang. Hold on, I'm checking it right now on the dashboard, Brad. I'm not kidding.
Can we have a drum roll?
You're up to 3, Brad.
Yes! I beat Twitter. I beat your 10,000 followers on Twitter. This is one of the greatest moments in my life.
So this also proves to everyone, also, A, get off of Twitter for God's sakes, but also have a friend like Brad Geiger and then entice him with Scotch whiskey and look at what doors will open for you. Your tragedy will become a comedy if you allow a friend to tweet about your show on Blue Sky. Oh God.
I can be easily bought. I'm just telling you, I am not hard to sway. Let's put it that way.
No, not hard to sway. I can't believe you're up to 3 within 24 hours. You son of a bitch. I owe you 3 Scotch. Is it?
I love it.
How do you say multiples of Scotch? I owe you 3 Scotches?
3 Scotches. 3 Scotch. I would say 3 Scotches.
Right?
Yeah.
Scotches. Scotches sounds like, I don't know what that says. It sounds weird. It's got a weird mouthfeel. Much like Scotch. Hey-o, I'm here all week.
Got him.
All right, so what do we got, Brad? What's our next topic for today, my friend?
Oh, this is such a great question. Because tell me if this doesn't feel familiar. It says, hey, Dave and Brad, I'm really happy to say I have a wonderful desk job that lets me work on my comic during large bouts of downtime.
Oh, that's the dream.
Yes. This blessing does not go over in my head, but I was listening to an old episode where Dave had some interactions on his plane rides, like working on your little drawings, and it got under his skin. I have the same thing happen at my job regularly. I've been working here for 10 years, and I update everyone on my schooling. I graduated 5 years ago, but while writing, drawing, or anything, people come up to me and asking me stuff like, When do you graduate? What are you studying for? What are you in school for? You're going to go and try and apply for Disney? You're going to try and submit those for publishing? They make it sound like I would not be doing any of this unless I had a direct and immediate benefit from it. But I don't really want to have to describe the whole webcomic business model to them. They're all fairly elderly and we live in a small town. And how I'm about 5 or 10 years away from being at a net gain monetarily. Essentially, I think I come off rude because I feel belittled. What would you be trying to communicate in this sort of scenario?
So is it wrong, Brad, that as a comic artist, my immediate reaction is that I want to joke about it in a way that, like, well, much like your work on the bench press, it's going to be pretty tragic at the end of this comic, and it's a pretty sad result. But and just leave it at that. Like, just let them be like, well, much like your work on the treadmill, I feel like I'm spinning my wheels making this comic. You know,
I'm getting nowhere fast.
I'm getting nowhere fast. Yeah, exactly. I mean, so here's the thing. I'm further on in my career, so it doesn't bother me as much. So I'm much more likely to give an answer that just ends the subject quickly.
Yes.
Just so I can be like, I'm done with that. I don't even want to talk about it at all.
Yeah.
But I understand if you're younger or earlier in your career, that a little bit you just want to give one nugget, but that just so they know that you are serious about this and that you're not just wasting your time. But at the same time, you don't want to have to explain the whole world to them about the business model and what you're trying to do and all this and that. So I would God bless. I don't know what I would do. Younger me would give a very different answer where I would almost try to start a conversation. And then 10 years later, I would have learned that never ends well.
Yes.
So now I'm just like, just doodling. I would just be like, just doodling. Like, who cares? You know, passing the time.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, I would keep these people on a need-to-know basis.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In other words, I get that you feel as if you should answer their questions. Like when they're saying, are you going to try and get work at Disney? Of course, you and I both know that that's a horrible, horrible thing to do right now, unless you're a very specific type of person.
Right.
And this is probably not something that, but for if you're talking to an older person, their go-to for any art type person is, you're going to go to work at Disney because that's the top of the line. They do the best work. They, at one point, I'm sure they paid and had excellent benefits for their people going back several years. And that certainly I don't think is the case anymore. But what are you going to do? Sit there and explain that to them?
Yeah.
No,
and also,
there's no
what's
upside.
the end result of that? And here's the thing is I will tell on my younger self.
Yeah.
Younger me just wanted the win. You know what I mean? I wanted to tell them, no, I am serious about this. And no, I am going to make something of this. And no, this is important to me. And this is not me fooling around. And no, I can do this. Yeah. And I will show you, Ruth Ann, with your elderly loose elbow skin. I'm going to do this. You know, but now older me is like, I don't need the win. I F this. Yeah. I'm just doodling. You know, I'm just some chicken scratches. You know, I don't need it. But it took me a decade of, frankly, loving myself that I didn't need to do it as much anymore, you know?
It's the same exact thing that when people come up to you on the street and they ask you how you're doing, you don't actually tell them how you're doing.
Yeah, like if you ever ask a European how they're doing and they give you the real answer, and you're like, oh, no, that's not how we do this in America. You just say, I'm fine. That's all you say.
I want out of this conversation immediately. Yeah. It's like no one actually expects you to tell you how you're doing when they ask. It's just a nicety. And these people are doing niceties at the desk. They don't want to just treat you as an object. They want to be a certain amount of friendly. So they're saying the first thing that comes to their head. And your job is to give them a very surface level answer. You don't owe them more than that. And frankly, they don't care about more than that. They're not really looking for an answer.
They're just asking you where the fresh towels are, really. But they need a nicety to start the conversation. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And here's the thing, as you get older, two things that you realize about people. nobody, Brad and I included, really knows what they're doing. We're all kind of stumbling through life, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then everybody is still emotionally kind of the same 13-year-old trying to go through life, trying to be nice and to start a conversation, but not really knowing. They're awkward as hell. We're all that way. All of us are. In as much as Brad doesn't agree with that, he wants to say that he's not an awkward 13-year-old emotionally.
I wish I could disagree. You know, I'm the worst of what you're talking about. I'm the absolute worst. I'm the kid standing in the corner, scared to talk to anybody.
So even Ruth Ann, elderly at a small town gym with her loose elbow skin, she is still emotionally that same 13-year-old that doesn't know how to start a conversation. Yeah. And she is still, like all of us, the kind of person that doesn't really know how to navigate through life. It's still awkward for her because we're all human and we're all trying to. So she's going to throw out a nicety like working hard or hardly working. You know, it's like no one really wants an answer to that. They just don't know how to start a conversation because they're flipping awkward too, you know? Yep. So as I've gotten older and as I've realized that, and as I've realized that I don't need the win conversationally, I'm just like, just doodling, just chicken scratches, just something to pass the time. And then you're done. And then I go into, here, Ruth Ann, here's your towel, you know, and then, or, oh yeah, I can go ahead and absolutely fix that machine for you, Ruth Ann, because I don't need it in the way that I did in my 20s and my 30s anymore, you know?
Yeah. And give yourself that present of not needing to justify yourself to people. And you'll find that it's very rewarding, of saying, you know what? Disney might be fun. Who knows? Maybe
just
someday.
leave it at that,
And then just let them go. It doesn't matter. They're not writing a book. This isn't going to go out on into the world. So it's just between you and Henry over there, and let it go. And I think what you're going to find is that there's something very freeing to not have to answer these questions, because so much of this is all in your head too. It's like you feel like you're being put on the spot. They're judging you, and what are you doing, and what's this webcomic, and what the hell is a webcomic anyway?
Right.
And again, if you're anything like me, all of that's between your ears, and what's actually happening is, you know, like Dave said, working hard or hardly working. They're not looking for an answer. They're just looking to be as nice as they need to be to get on to the next part of their day.
Exactly. And not for nothing, but the conversations that I used to have in my 20s and 30s where I was trying to prove a point, Brad, they would come up, they'd be like, oh, are you going to be like that alley-oop or that Barney Google in the newspaper? I tried in my 20s and 30s. There's no way to win that conversation. There's no way to explain to Ruth Ann with her loose elbow skin how your business model.
This poor Ruth Ann, are they hanging to the floor at this point?
Have you ever seen like early 80s at the gym? It's always loose elbow skin. And it's always, I don't know why that's my weird proclivity, but I'm always like, no one wants to see that. How about long sleeves for everybody over 75? And listen, I get it. The human body ages, but I'll tell you one time, Brad, I was in, where was I? Istanbul with friends, and one of them goes, hey, let's go to a Turkish bath. So we go to a Turkish bath, and we're the only young people there. And it's like a bunch of 85-year-old guys with loose elbow skin. And I was like, I do not like how the human body ages. I did not sign up to see a bunch of nude 85-year-old dudes right now, and this is not, I am not enjoying this experience.
Gravity is a cruel mistress.
It's a cruel mistress. So Ruth Ann, listen, I hear you, sister. We're all facing down that barrel. We're all facing that tragedy. It's comedy plus time is what it is.
So just be nice. Just be nice, and don't let it get under your skin or under your elbow skin if that's the case. Just let it go. It's not a reflection on you. I think that's our advice on this.
Absolutely. So, Brad, I think we got 5 more minutes. We can do one last question.
Oh, I think we can do this one in 5. Absolutely.
Okay. So this one comes in over on patreon.com/Comic Lab, and it says, I've made the jump to Blue Sky. By the way, good for you. And by the way, the tracking on my Kickstarter is showing that Blue Sky is working. Compared to Twitter and Instagram, Blue Sky. And just a reminder, everybody, Blue Sky, my audience is smaller. But as Brad says, is it smaller? Or was Twitter just full of bots and no one following? Anyway, Dave and Brad, I've made the jump to Blue Sky. My Twitter feed quickly had become a cesspit of divisive politics, and the comics community was barely appearing on there anymore. Of course, because your friends Dave and Brad have left, and so everybody's leaving.
That's right.
This is already beginning to happen on Blue Sky, as my comics posts aren't getting any engagement. But when I post something about ideology, it's comparatively soaring. I still want to be myself while promoting my work. What do I do, Brad?
Yeah.
What do I do?
This is a great concept. This is a great question. And we really need to talk about this because here's a person. And again, it gets into that mindset that we try to talk people out of all the time, right? Mm-hmm. Social media is not measured by the people. It's measured by the passion. And yet, this guy has gone over from Twitter to Blue Sky, but immediately has gotten back into counting numbers because you got to make the number go big. You got to make the number go big. Well, how big? I don't know. It's got to be bigger than it was yesterday. And so in this effort to try to make the number go big, this person realizes, hey, if I post this stuff about politics, I get lots of engagement. And I want lots of engagement, right?
Right.
Wrong. That's the wrong kind of engagement.
Right.
It's engagement. It's making the number go big, but it's not the right kind of engagement.
Right.
In fact, I'm going to argue that unless your persona, unless your comic is very much rooted in your personal politics,
unless you're Gary Trudeau, basically.
Yep. Yeah. Or if your comic talks about politics overtly, I know all comics are political.
Like in a social justice way, or characters who themselves are politically interested. Yes,
exactly. Or if that's a big part of who you are, or if you're one of these people that just, I got to talk about it. I just, if it's a personal feeling or a personal attribute that you just have to share what you feel about politics, by the way, which is valid.
Totally valid.
But if you're not that, then posting politics or any other thing that is not central to your branding is counterproductive, right? You post something on politics, you get all this great engagement. What you're not seeing is all the people that maybe said, "Oh, this guy, I don't like that," right? And that person might have been a reader to your comic, but because of your politics, you shuffled that person away. That's number one problem with that. Number two is, okay, you posted the politic thing. Now you get a lot of engagement. Fantastic. Is this person interested in your comic or in your politics? Or interested
or even like they're interested in the idea of your post in the politics, but not even in you necessarily as in a larger brand, right?
Right. Maybe they just showed up for the fight that ensued.
Exactly.
Right? And we've seen that happen in social media since there's been social media. We've seen people who have built very large followings, but the followings, some of them were for the comics, some of them were because they wanted to see the fights or they wanted to see the bombastic things this person would say. The question is, are you getting the right kind of engagement? And I will argue till my dying day, I don't want the big number. I want a passionate audience that's passionate about me, not about politics.
Not about the idea in the post. Yes, yes.
I want them to be interested in so I will take a small passionate audience over a large impassionate audience any day of the week. So yes, you can absolutely get engagement from politics. The question you got to ask yourself is it the right audience that you're building?
Right. So yes, to Brad's point, if you're Lalo Alcaraz or Ann Telnays or Mike Ramirez and your comics are themselves politically oriented or tinted, this is absolutely the right forum. But to everyone else, myself included, and I have stumbled down this path a couple of wrong times, is it's almost worth setting up a separate feed just for your personal opinions, because nothing great comes of stirring up anger, stirring up malcontent with political posts and the like. It doesn't really gain you anything other than a burst of It's like having a sugar rush versus eating a nutritious meal. You know what I mean? Yes, you ate 5 Snickers, but did that at all help your overall body health? No. You know what I mean? Right. But you saw a lot of activity, a lot of electricity, but it didn't really give you what you need. The same thing is true with a political post, or even something like this, Brad. For example, I went to the Apple Store the other day and happened to try on the what's that, the not the HoloLens. What's their new
the goggles?
Vision Pro, is that the name of it?
Yep.
Okay. Anyway, it's been out for, I don't know, a year and a half. There was nobody in this Apple Store, for one thing. I had to get an iPad fixed. Anyway, nobody there. And I was like, hey, can I try out the Vision Pro? Like, oh, yes, of course. 15 minutes to get the whole damn thing set up because it has to do your eye vision. They have to check your glasses. They have to do all this stuff. Oh, my God. I put it on, Brad. It was absolutely revelatory. It was an amazing technology. I haven't felt this way since I first tried an iPhone, the iPhone 1, when I saw Scott Kurtz have one. And it was amazing. Blew me away. After 15 minutes, I went, what the hell would I ever use this thing for? It's useless.
What am I doing here?
I can't imagine. I said, how can I draw with this? And the guy's like, nah, there's no real good way to do it. And so I was like, okay, so this is basically another technology where it's going to take 5 years for apps to be written where it'll be useful, right?
Yeah.
I made that post on Blue Sky, just that exact same thought, expressed that thought. Brad, it got more spread than I've ever gotten with any comic of mine ever on Blue Sky. But you know what it gained me? Absolutely nothing. It gained me absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So a lot of action, a lot of mice running on their wheels, a lot of spreading, a very viral, a lot of comments, not a single damn follower that day, right?
Yeah.
And this is just a different way of saying, in the same way that politics, or in the same way about posts about complaining or anger, they'll generate a lot of activity, but it won't generate anything useful to your career, you know?
Let's talk about that word useful as we're wrapping this concept up. And that is the last thing I want to say here, because every time we talk about this, it's very easy to misunderstand what we're saying. I'm going to tell you that I think the third reason, I gave you a couple. I'll tell you one more reason I do not speak about politics or any of that other shit on social media. Because when you post something political on social media, it makes you think untruly that you've done something about the issue. In other words,
it's like slacktivism. Yeah.
Slacktivism. You think pushing that fucking button means that you've done something, that you've done your part now. And so every time I think about doing something like this, and I think, okay, what's going to be more useful? Pushing this button on social media, or writing a check to a political organization or a mutual aid organization, or showing up and volunteering or doing any number of those things. Actually doing something, stepping out into the street for a protest. Those things, I think, have value in the world. Making a tweet makes you feel as if you're doing something.
Yeah, you got the endorphin rush, but nothing that came of it.
Then you sit on your ass and don't do anything. And all this, I'm going to write a firmly worded skeet about this. By the way, Dave, on Blue Sky, we're supposed to be talking about skeets.
I know. I just hate the word skeet.
I'm not going to say skeet. That's the once and the last time you're going to hear me say it on the show.
Skeet sounds like a word of like the teenagers came up with from when they shit themselves. You know, it's like, damn it, I skeeted.
I got a skeet. Hey, what do you call it when a fart has edges? It's a skeet. So
what? I've never heard that before. When a fart has edges.
So yeah, that's the other reason. I'm not saying you shouldn't be political, especially right now. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be involved in what's going on, but don't kid yourself that social media post is doing anything, that it means anything. It's performative. And it's keeping you from doing actual things in your community that might actually help. That's the other reason I don't like it. Plus, all those other things, that we said earlier. Your best bet when you're on social media, focus on your brand, focus on who you are. If you're trying to figure out, now that I can't talk about politics, what I'm going to talk about, remember that's why we wrote the 4 C's of social media. That's why we talk about pride and joy. That's why we talk about focusing on your branding and figuring out what your branding is. And by the way, we have 2 excellent pro tips, focusing in on branding and how you use that. Those are some great places to look on all of this. And if you're fired up about politics, by all means, go out into your community and do something. But this performative social media, it's counterproductive.
Our phones have a way of lying to us that the thing that we're doing has value. In the same way that doom scrolling at the end of the night, I do it myself.
Yep.
What I should be doing is reading a book. Yeah. It actually does the thing for me that I'm seeking the phone to do.
Yes.
And does not deliver. Slacktivism on social media is the same phone substitute for real world action that can make a positive change. Yeah. And I fall for it just like you all do. I'm not trying to say that I'm better than thou, holier than thou. Yeah. I'm just saying our phones lie to us about what it wants to promise versus what it actually achieves, you know?
Yeah. I'll tell you one thing I can promise is that we don't have any more time to talk comics. I can promise you that you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my friend Ariel, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evilcomic.com.
And my good friend Dave Kellett. You can check out his Kickstarter running now at dogkickstarter.com. But don't put dogkickstarter.com in. Go over to Blue Sky.
Please go to Brad's Blue Sky feed.
It's going to be a long weekend in Boston.
He needs this.
I need this. Also, he's the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped, and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com, and Drive at drivecomic.com.
You know what we're going to see? We're going to see people canceling their pledge and then going through your damn link and then repledging.
Yes.
Oh, and I'm going to owe you 40
nothing would
drinks.
make me happier.
I'm going to order you. Oh my God. The Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from the very talented Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by the ever wonderful Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode like this one.
We
got another one.
I'm so excited.
We had a little bit of a dry spot there. Listen to this. Coming in from Apple Podcasts, headline, Your New Best Friends.
Oh!
Isn't this great?
That's all I need to hear. We can stop right there.
It gets better.
No, because if you keep going, it becomes a tragedy. Leave it at comedy.
Oh, that's a wonderful tie-in. All right, here's what it says. Do you like comics? Of course you do. Everyone loves comics. Do you like making comics? If so, this podcast is for you. Comic veterans Brad Geiger and Dave Kellett share their knowledge and experience about making comics in a fun and entertaining way, providing a slew of solid advice, tips, and encouragement every episode. More of a conversation than a how-to, the duo answers listener questions regarding the independent comic business, creative, and business side, providing hilarious anecdotes that cover every topic under the sun. Every episode features a deep dive into a specific topic regarding the making of comics and the making of a living through comics. It's informative, fascinating, and often wickedly funny, and an invaluable resource whether you are new to making comics, have yet to dip your toe in, or are a comic veteran. A visit with Brad and Dave is always a great time, and if you're lucky, Susan McTaggart may even make an appearance. Wasn't that a great review?
I want to personally thank Ruth Ann for that wonderful review. That was absolutely
after everything
gorgeous.
You said about her elbows.
I know, and so I'm going to say Comic Lab is made possible by your support, Ruth Ann, on patreon.com/Comic Lab. So I will go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/Loose Elbow Skin.
Loose Elbow Skin. All I can think of is a pterodactyl. You know how they had that skin that hung from their arms, but they were able to use it to fly? That's a creative use of loose elbow skin.
Are you implying that once we reach our late 70s and 80s, if Ruth Ann just had the arm strength to flap fast enough, she could pterodactyl that baby?
That and hollow bones, she'd be up there.
She's on her way with osteoporosis. That's great.
That's right.
Oh, my God. So she comes up to Brad Geiger at the desk, and she's like, so are you making your little drawings for Disney? And Brad goes, just making my doodles. And then you hear... as she flaps off into the small town night. I've been Ruth Ann!